Hey guys, Nick Bosco here, and today I have something very special planned. I'm going to be talking with Dan Tom of MMA Junkie and the Protect Your Neck podcast, and I'm going to be doing a thing where it's going to be talking to MMA media members, all different kinds, writers, photographers, videographers, personalities, anyone you can think of. And I'm going to be calling it MMA Media Monthly. So hopefully I'll be doing these every month. And I hope you guys enjoy them. I'm going to be talking with Dan about like how he got started in MMA media, just the ins and outs of the business, and some tips for anybody who wants to get involved. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Follow him on all his different stuff, his YouTube channel, Twitter, everything you can find. I'll link everything below. And if you guys can subscribe to me, I really appreciate it. So I hope you guys enjoy this interview. And if there's anyone you can think of that you want to see on the MMA Media Monthly videos, series, whatever, just let me know. All right, thanks guys. I just kind of wanted to do like an MMA media, like, I don't know, monthly thing, like talking to a bunch of different people in like MMA media and like see everybody's story, because I know everybody's story is like so different, and you know, there's a lot of people that are like trying to come up in, you know, trying to get in the business, and you know, just I think it would help them out. Plus it helped me out too, because then I could pick everybody's brain.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I like this stuff. I wish they did it more.
All right, cool. Well, I'll start off with like how you got into doing MMA media. I think we kind of both started off in the same spot, I think, with MMA Latest News. I don't know if that's your real beginning or not, but I know we both started off there.
Pretty much like, yeah, I mean, like Jim Edwards, shout out to Jim Edwards. He reached out to me. I guess I was a little hesitant there because I initially started with my own site, mixedmartialanalyst.com, which is still up, and I still use it to host my podcast, the Protect Your Neck podcast, and all that good stuff there. But it was more just kind of like an exercise to get something out there in hopes that someone would pick up on it and whatnot, you know, was just putting out, again, you know, speaking of like we spoke, you know, it is like, you know, niche content, you know, want to find like your own little groove, right? That's not a bad piece of advice. You'll hear guys from like Ariel Helwani on down kind of have their own similar version of that. So I was just trying to do my version. And yes, I got picked up by MMA Latest, where we both were, you know, working. And yeah, we both got our start there. Technically, that is crazy. A lot of people got their start there, and that's why like these sites, like these smaller sites, you know, I'll use in air quotes. They're really important. They are super important now, kind of more than ever. If you're looking to get experience, and that's where I was able to get experience. Like I studied, you know, things around broadcasting, and I've had somewhat broadcasting experience through acting and whatnot, both in and out of school, college, and you know, preliminary school, whatever you want to call it, grade school. Um, it wasn't too difficult for the more on camera stuff, but like as far as like journalism or newsrooms or even just like chats and technology, I'm an old. I may look young, but I'm an old man at heart. I don't do well with this inundation and all these different programs, but it's a really good experience because, and I'm sure you could speak to this, Nicole, like you may do or sign up to do one or a few things even, but you end up doing a lot more. It's kind of how it always is. And it becomes really a useful experience to learn how to do these different skills.
Yeah, I thought it was like pretty interesting. Like when I first like signed on with MMA Latest News, like I was following them because I wanted to like, you know, just get some MMA news in my life. So then they were like put up that they were looking for like writers, and you know, I was like, well, I never written anything before, but like I don't, like where I am, like none of my friends are interested in MMA at all. So I was like, well, I think it'd be fun to like get on there, just like talk to people about MMA, you know, like that's the only reason I really got on Twitter too, because I was like, I have nobody to talk to like in real life, and then like it just kind of snowballed from there. Like I didn't think like I was gonna be like doing this as like a job or anything. It was just more like just for fun. You know, I was stuck home with my kids, like being a stay-at-home mom, and I was just like bored. So it's like funny like how you like just like it's like kind of snowballed into that. Like did you ever think that you were gonna like be talking to like real fighters and stuff like when you first started? Or did you just like kind of do it just like out of a passion of like, because you're really good at like fight analysts and stuff like that. So you like you were breaking down the fights and everything like that. Did you have like any ambition to like interview people or like it to go from there?
I'm glad you mentioned that. Like maybe not as much in the beginning. I feel like it was something I needed to do and offer, and I still feel like it's something that I should do more because of my backyard being Las Vegas. And I did come from from the the martial arts side of things. I wasn't a pro fighter. I only competed in amateur, grappling, kickboxing, boxing, never pro in any of these facets. But yeah, I came from the gym kind of martial arts side of thing. And so having those connections, I guess, and the way I'm wired too, like I don't know. I've never been, even when I see like real life celebrities, I'm one of those weird people where I'm like, okay, they probably don't want to be bothered. Like, and I just kind of go about my business. And, being at a gym like Extreme Couture, you really are kind of just, you get that kind of starstruck, out of the way real fast, especially in the heyday when I was kind of coming up in the mid aughts, when the gym just started and, Las Vegas is now becoming that hotbed. UFC is entering its golden era, right? The Brock Lesnar era, all those things are to come. So it was really easy to kind of get that, out of my system. But I do feel like I still need to utilize that more. And even if you're not in like a big hotbed, I would argue that it could even be better if you're not in a big hotbed, like if you're in some other regions, whether it's in the South, Midwest, East Coast, because you might not have as sexy gyms or as much sexy names as so to speak, but they're much more accessible in a sport that's already, as you know, Nicole, pretty accessible in comparison to other sports. So those are really good things, even for jobs. Like there's more fights that happen here, even in this pandemic era in Las Vegas. But like one of my things I would love to do more, not just, I'm glad you mentioned interviewing fighters because I do enjoy it, the interviewing process, but also calling fights. That's honestly a dream job of mine. And I feel like it would almost be easier to get these certain jobs if like it was like you were on a smaller scene in a smaller show. Whereas here it's like a super hotbed. You got more competition, whether it's the fighters themselves, as we're seeing more of them and good on them, right? Making more of a transition into commentary and analysis. We're even seeing more of the fighters step into the media. So and I'm sure you've seen your own version, Nicole, but it's a real hotbed. I know I launched off of your question from interviews, but yeah, I do got to do those more.
I guess the good thing with starting where we did is like we had UFC credentials like pretty much from since I started there anyway, and like being able to see that side of it was really like eye opening. That's like you can kind of just get in close with everybody. Like maybe you didn't go to the UFC fights or anything, or but I'm sure maybe like Bellator and stuff was accessible to everybody. It's just it's crazy like how like you said, accessible it is in this sport for like anybody who really wants to get into it. And there's so much more media outlets nowadays than there was just even 5 years ago for like people that want to jump in. So, I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, very true. They still exist. Obviously, the monster in the room now is ESPN since that transition, and we've definitely seen like some big changes in the space, especially if your beat is like breaking news, right? That's been a lot harder to do, right? With the UFC's relationship with ESPN there. That said, to your point, Nicole, like there is still a ton of smaller sites, and I use that not as a negative. I think it's a positive, like the Body Lock MMA, which Michael Fidadell does the MMA Prospect Watch, right? You got the guys from the Fight Site who do great analysis, and you've got all these, all these smaller sites that offer their own news and outlets and kind of branded coverage. Like it's not a bad idea if you're, trying to get into this space or dabble, even if you don't want to make it a career, just get that experience. Like I don't want to say use MMA, but like, yeah, in a positive way, use the fertile ground that's there, especially if you genuinely like it and you genuinely feel you have something to contribute.
Mm-hmm. When you started with your podcast, your website, and MMA news, did you have like a goal in mind? Like, I want to get to like one of the big sites. Like, when we first started, I think it was like MMA Fighting and MMA Junkie were like the two big ones to kind of strive for. Was that like a goal of yours to get with them? Because I mean, you're with them now, so it worked out.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because like it was. I don't know if it was a goal. It was, but I don't know if that's like a fair thing to say, like in a traditional sense, because for people that know me, I always had a relationship with MMA Junkie through Gorgeous George and Goes, who do MMA Junkie Radio. Like they would interview me like before my amateur fights or like just as a competitor and as a fan, they would give me time of day. So I was kind of already ingratiated to the MMA Junkie family through that. They were when I was just getting into the sport, like I said, in the mid aughts and more to mid to later aughts when MMA Junkie comes around. they were my homepage. Like right now it's Google or something like that. I think it's for most people when you open your internet tab or button. For me, it was just MMA. It would go, I had it set to go right to MMAJunkie.com. So it kind of was a full circle for me in that sense. Super grateful, super cool story, all that stuff, right? But as far as like a goal, it's funny because that's something I've actually had to, I try to reassess, and it's not because you're not happy. I forget who said this. Someone had it was a big name who kind of passed this on and on a business podcast. But it doesn't matter how happy you are and how good the people are around you and how grateful you should be for your lot or state or for the good things that are in your current state, right? That being said, it's perfectly fine to stop and still reassess, question, and make sure that you always still have fresh goals, because in the traditional sense, I think that is a really good way to use the word goal. And as I do that, to answer your question here, like, I think about other things, and it's not so much outlets or places as we've seen, like, the space can be shooken up as far as which outlets hold value, or maybe they hold value, but, there's a lot of cuts since this whole, moving to digital media, more video, pivoting to video, all these things, right? Um, it's not like a long staying club, and that's not a dig on any of these companies or the one that I work for, right? That's just the way of life. So I at least try to be careful in framing my goals that way and think of more, not so much where I want to do it, but what I want to do. And to your question prior, I want to do more interviews and have that kind of a forum, and I've been trying to do that a little more on my podcast, right? And I only started my podcast after being on the MMA Latest podcast. I always wanted to do a podcast. That was a goal, right? Again, not necessarily for this place or that place, but my goals were more what I wanted to do. And when I podcast with MMA Latest and got those reps in with Jordan Killian and all those guys, it made me realize, Nicole, that I'm like, yeah, I really like this thing. I got to start my own, which I always wanted to do, but that really lit a fire under me, So I'm just trying to reassess with those goals now, maybe more interviews and perhaps calling fights, trying to put that out more in the universe. Otherwise, yeah, I'm happy where I'm at too as well.
I want to touch on a little something you said. It might be like a sensitive subject. I don't know, but like you said that you kind of knew the guys from MMA Junkie to begin with. So do you think like it's kind of like who you know? I feel like that a lot of like people who kind of like get it up in the MMA media, and they kind of like some of them don't really want to bring anybody else up with them, and some of them do. Like I mean, this might be just my bias, but I kind of feel like it's a boys' club. Like, there's very few women going up, and I feel like you see a lot of the people calling out, like, oh, this guy, like on Twitter, they'll say, like, oh, you watch him, he's a hustler, whatever. Like, but like everybody's experience is different. Like, some people, that's all they're doing, like they're only doing this, and some other people have real jobs that they have to take care of. Other people have like family members they have to take care of. So it's like kind of like getting the call out of like, you this guy's a hustler, keep your eye on him, or girl. Some people do, but like I feel like that is like a big step up in the system of growing up in MMA media.
Yeah, I wish we saw more of it, and you think that, it's been a more of a growing trend, thankfully. I don't want to use the word trend because it shouldn't be a trend, nor should it be labeled as such. But I guess what I mean to say is that as the world evolves and things even out to where they should have been in the first place, you would think that MMA, with it being so ahead in a lot of areas, it's still also traditionally been behind in a lot of areas, and that's very fair to say. As far as the women aspect. Now, I can't speak too much on that because I'm not a woman, but what I will say on that, as I shift to your question, is that whether it's these smaller news outlets, whether it's more of certain types of coverage, whether it's more female faces or Asian faces or whatever group is not being, you feel is not being represented, like, vote with your dollars, people. That is the one thing. We can all say these things, and not enough people say it. I agree with you, Nicole, or not enough, advocation perhaps is there. But I know that there is a solid group who do support and don't see with these colors or gender blinders or what have you. And I would just try to remind those people that saying it's all well and good, but make sure to support, share, like, subscribe, and do all those things. Those little things go a long way. And we should have more people like yourself doing these interviews. We should have more of my colleagues like Fernanda Prates or Farah Hanoun, which again, talk about a boys club. And I'm not trying to get political or cultural or anything like, but massive props again to a female like Farah, that part of the world where MMA is not a very big thing. And being a female with such a niche subject to like now be steadily making her way by grinding, covering smaller regional people, interviewing and building your way up from there. Like that's a great model. So it's a great example, but we should have more of these examples. And I hope we do start to have more people like yourself, Nicole, and others. But yes, to your original question, it's certainly a lot of who you know. And it's not I can see why you're hesitant to say that because it could come off insulting, but it's not. It's really, it's an honest question. And there's two parts of it. And the second part of it is you're right, is that it's not a bad thing to have people help you. You're really lucky. And that's why I always just, before, during, and even though I still work with Gorgeous George and Goes, their show unfortunately downsized when they moved off Sirius. So that's why I'll only, maybe guest on there as occasion, but like it doesn't matter what the status is. I've always considered those guys family because in this industry, I can tell you, even someone like myself, who people are like, oh, Dan's doing well. He's got the blue check mark or whatever, which doesn't mean crap to me, by the way, and shouldn't mean to you. But I could totally see that. Okay, that's fine. But let me tell you, boy, there is, I, I'm not going to say it's because of this reason or that reason. In fact, I'll probably just say, hey, I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and that's totally okay. And I know that, and I accept that, but it definitely feels like for whatever the motive is, and often it's not even anything to do with myself for all my faults or you, the proverbial you out there. It's usually the other person's issues, when you're worrying about it. It's their insecurities. And after a while, I still struggle with it because I see a lot of those walls too, where I'm like, I know I exist, a mother effer. We've been on the same shows. I've met you in person. I've had beers with you. We've shared the same studio and worked for the same radio company. Yet you don't follow me or don't act like I exist. And you could get really dangerous to play that game. And as I get in this game longer, I realize it's harder to live by these things and always to consistently repay favors, even though that's not why you should be doing things, right? As a person, right? Um, Everyone's morals are different. I'm not trying to push mine on yours. Just throwing a basic one out there. You can't expect that. Even like I said, vote with your dollars, do these things, like, subscribe. I try to live by that, Nicole. It's always tough to do, but after a while, yeah, you do start to see trends. You're like, okay, I don't think it's a coincidence that these people aren't, this or that. So rather than get hung up in the negative, just to bring it to the positive, is that when you do find people who will, whether they work with you, like guys like the Georges and Goes who work with me, or they're people like the Fight Site guys who don't even work for my outlet and are kind to me. It doesn't matter where the support comes from. If you're getting genuine support from people in your field, especially in this field, it's a very kill or be killed. Like make sure you hold on to those and not cultivate because that sounds fake and phony, but in a genuine way, really nourish those relationships because it's rare. It is rare, that there is a lot of it's a lot of who you know, and and it's a lot of not who you don't know, but who doesn't want you to maybe be in the same space as them. You never know that. You can't control that, but you can be good to the people who are good to you.
Yeah. And kind of on that topic, like, I don't know, with using Twitter, sometimes there's a lot of people that want to be, MMA media or MMA Twitter, they call it. Like, they have people that follow you and you interact with them. Sometimes it's hard to keep everything straight, too. So, like, if you feel like, if somebody out there feels like I should be following them and we like talk or whatever, like just tell me that, because if I'm not following you, it's maybe I don't realize it, or if I'm not supporting your YouTube channel, or like I feel like it's okay to be like, hey, can you follow me or can you subscribe? Like I feel like me personally, it's okay to reach out. Like it gets so confusing too, because like even when you're like going to an event or something, you're going to cover UFC and you see somebody there and you're like, I think I know them, but like even like sometimes like their picture on Twitter is like doesn't look like them, or it's like a different image or something, and you like feel bad. I just find that so weird that like when you're like talking to somebody on Twitter, so and then when you get to there in person, maybe you're not like talking to each other, or like I feel like it's just like you can come up to me and just like introduce yourself again, because it gets a little confusing with that.
Oh, Nicole, that's happened to me so much. In fact, shout out to my man Steven Morocco, who just did an awesome piece over there at MMA Fighting on Spencer the King Fisher. Steven, of course, used to work with MMA Junkie, and like I didn't have a lot of interactions with Steven because he's not much of an on-site guy. He stayed up in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm not much of a. Everyone thinks I go to a ton of shows. Like I don't. Like I go to Contender Series, and I barely go to shows because if I go to a show, I got to work. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather with my beat. I don't technically have to be at the shows. We got like guys like the pros, like the John Morgans of the world, to do that. You know what I'm saying? They don't need me, which is fine. I'm happy enjoying from the comfort of my couch on Saturday, but I don't get those reps. So a lot of times, to your point, like I'll see people and back to Steven, and I don't even realize that I met him. Like I think it was like that quintet, like at the end of 2019 or something. Like, and I think he just went to MMA fighting too. And for whatever reason, I'm the most on. I can guarantee. I know people. I love people on Junkie, and I love people on MMA fighting, and have been friends with people on MMA fighting before they got to MMA fighting. So I can honestly say that I know and can say this. I am the least competitive person, and I know there's like a big competition there. I hate it because I literally love everybody. If you do good work or a good person, you're my fan. And if you look at like my shares, like I'm not really. There's not a lot of partisanship as far as like what I share. If it's good work, it's good work. If it's funny, it's funny. And so there's none of that vibe, which is what makes the story so cringeworthy. And Steve, it was there at the quintet, Steve Morocco, and he was, I forget where he was sitting, but like Goes and George was sitting on the opposite direction. So I was mainly turning and talking to them, and I barely turned that way. And I'm so tunnel vision, like even at the gym when I would train, like that was another thing. Like I always wish I became more friendly with my training partners because I realized when I got injured and stopped training, I didn't have these connections. And I'm like, oh, that's because you weren't friendly at the gym, Dan. You weren't, pardon my French, I wasn't a jerk or anything like that. But like I would just get tunnel vision. I'm there to do work. I'm not there to fraternize. And that's kind of my weird, and it can be taken the wrong way, right? And so after I'm there covering quintet, I go and get up and I think I said like bye in like Steve's direction, but like I didn't even like introduce myself. Like it's the first time we've worked together for years. We finally are kind of sitting almost next to each other. He was just one row behind me and to the right, and I like blew right by the guy like I never knew him. And I'm like, and I didn't think until after. I'm like, oh wait, that was Morocco. Oh my gosh, I didn't even miss it. And I'm like, he probably thinks I'm the biggest jerk, and he just went to MMA fighting. So he's probably, does Dan think like because I went to MMA fighting that? Oh, and like that. And again, that's not me. For all my faults, that's definitely not one of them. I'm not competitive about stupid things. But yeah, that totally, like all those little stories I share that. Sorry, a little too TMI, but like I think we all have these versions of these stories if you do this job, which is again to my previous point why I try not to take things personal because like, yo, I've been the jerk plenty of times without even trying.
You pull the whole like nice to meet you, and they're like, we've actually met 3 times before, and you're like, oh.
Oh yeah, I'm so bad at that. I remember all these random stats, and then like when it comes to people's names or stuff, I'll be the guy like, all right, nice seeing you, Phil. My name's Chuck. All right, Sanders. Like it's just I can't get their names right. Like it's so bad. I don't know what's wrong with me. Thankfully, I can remember stuff for work, but like that's it.
I think like back in like the 80s or 90s or whatever, like you felt like a journalist. You think like the guy with the pencil in his ear and he's like going to the locker room and whatever. But so now it's like almost anybody can become a journalist basically if you have like social media and you can write somewhat decently or have a video camera. So it's like kind of weird now that it's like one thing that I think of, or I think a lot of people don't think about, it's like you kind of have to have like tough skin. You know what I'm saying? Like, do you get a lot of like criticism on your work, and like how do you deal with that?
That's a great point because I don't even think that, say all what you will of the barriers to entry being lowered for journalism. I don't even think the most prestigious journalists that went to journalism school that are still relevant today could have prepared you or anybody, the proverbial you, right, for what's to come. Human beings aren't meant for this much inundation. I know I made a joke about me feeling like an old man, hating all these different Slack channels and Discords and all these things. But the truth is, I think that none of us are really wired for it. Can some of us handle it better? Yeah, of course. I wish I was amongst those, but I really, at the end of the day, don't think any of us are meant for that. And with that inundation, especially if it's, negative or criticisms, and I'm someone that always have tried to take criticisms well and have been privy to many in life. That's for dang sure. So I've had plenty of practice having those bullets thrown my way, as I'm sure many of you have, right? The proverbial you out there. Yeah, that was one of my biggest fears going into it. However, I feel like I can't complain. A, because, well, again, not being able to speak for females, but I will dare to say that the females get it way worse, 10x, as far as what's in their DMs to the replies that I see that people shamefully post. Like, it's ridiculous. So there's that. I feel bad. I can't really fully complain, but honestly, where I really feel like I can't complain is the honest truth is I feel like I was going to get it a lot worse than I did. Now I feel like for all my faults, I think at the end of the day, you can't hate a guy too hard who is working really hard to put out in-depth information consistently that really not a lot of people are still really doing and doing it for free on multiple facets on multiple mediums. Um, so that's always kind of been my model. It's like you don't gotta love me. You can hate me if you want. I want I want to be able to offer unique information on free platforms, and that was going to be my way in, because that way you can love me or hate me, but I'm offering you hopefully useful stuff that you can use, whether you're trying to make a fantasy play, a bet, whether you're a broadcaster or a fellow media member that you're going to be talking about this on camera. You don't want to sound like an idiot. You want some cool stats. Go ahead, use my stuff. That's what it's there for. But it's like, so I think when you genuinely, put yourself out there, I think that maybe helps me for all my faults and on the things that people find problems with, which is totally cool. That's just going to be the case no matter who you are, people. Um, so yeah, I feel like I should still be getting it worse. Now, granted, I'm not. Again, I know I work for a great outlet, and I got the blue check mark, but not me just being self-deprecating here. No, I'm not that successful, people. I don't have huge numbers. I don't do huge numbers behind the scenes or what you can see. So perhaps maybe that's also a reason why. Maybe when if I were to hit like the Ariel Helwani tier, then you'd see a lot more guaranteed, right? That's kind of what comes with numbers. But I feel like I've been pretty good about it. I don't want to. I don't think I can give people advice, Nicole, as far as like what to do or what to prepare for. Nor do I feel like I'm qualified to do that, because I also think it would set you up for failure because again, you're going to get it no matter what. But I just would say is just be genuine with who you are and kind of remember those checks and balances as far as supporting good work, good people, or people who have been good to you. And I think you'll generally find where you settle. It might not where you want it to be, or as popular as maybe some people as far as their goals, right, have in their minds. But if you're pretty realistic about it, I think that's a realistic way to approach it, is just be genuine, both with your content and your expectations with the criticisms that can come back in return. Unless you're a female, then I'm sorry, you're swimming in really bad waters with the MMA space. There's really bad people out there. I apologize to you ladies, but don't let it discourage you because we need more of you.
Yeah. Actually, I've been pretty good. I had dodged a bunch of those, so I've been pretty good. But so I wanted to ask you like a little bit about like the logistics of maybe business kind of like are you doing it full time right now? Would you consider that like your full time job?
Lucky enough to be doing it full time, but people need to understand that there's a lot of sacrifices with my situation personally to do it now, to have put myself in a position to do it, because it's a grouped answer there, and I believe that answer is going to be grouped as well, but differently for a lot of people. And I also feel like you'd be surprised on how many people, whether the blue check mark names that have been in this business for a long time, still care, whether it was quietly on purposely or not, carry full-time gigs. And those people are smart, by the way. I would do it that way if I could. I probably don't have the time now personally because I split time helping take care of family and other things personally. As far as like those things that's changed my life, and those things, of course, I'm sure many of y'all, family come first, right? um and the money I do make, as far as the outlets I work for, I'm very grateful for these paychecks, folks, but they're not much. Don't get it twisted. And I don't believe that even the higher tier media is making, a crazy amount either. More than me, that's for dang sure. And they're definitely smart on how to monetize themselves, right? As far as their channels and all this stuff. And I do have beer money and income through, little sponsorship things or affiliate program windows here or this or that. And again, this sound, be a little too personal here, but I don't do a gambling podcast for no reason, and especially recently, you know, that's been helpful too. I don't like to talk or brag about that, and I would be very careful about people who do brag about how well they do. They're usually trying to get you to buy into their business, and I'm not hating on them. You do you, y'all. I'm just saying there's a reason why I don't talk about it that much or get braggadocious about that kind of stuff. But yeah, it helps. Everyone has their own answer for that, but you know that's been mine. It's not an easy juggle. There's weeks, especially with the family duties that grow, where I'm just like, is this worth it? All this time I'm putting for the paychecks that I get across, and you know, I think about as much as I this is a dream job, and I call it a dream job, and I stand by that. Boy, you know, between the stresses of life to this working in the space, it ain't easy. And I'd be lying if I said there aren't repetitive times where I'm constantly having to talk myself off the edge of the proverbial cliff as far as career choices. It's not easy, but yes, I am very grateful to be doing it full time. But there's a lot of things that have to go into that.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about, like, not to go like too much into detail, maybe like a quick, like, how did you decide like the kind of path of your career in terms of like making money? How do you choose like sponsorships? How do you choose like which outlets you're going to write for, or like what kind of like things to join up with, kind of? Not you don't have to do like a crazy elaborate like whatever.
I've always been bad. See, again, I come from the martial arts side of things. And when I was going into being a martial arts teacher the first time, before MMA in the karate days, when I was just getting out of high school, uh, after the 90s ended, it was a quick realization to me that the best teachers were bad businessmen. And I was a pretty good teacher. The one compliment I will give myself is I was a pretty good teacher, Nicole, but that meant I'm a bad businessman. So much so that if you want my advice to answer your question, you actually have to go back and do the opposite of like most of the things I've told you on this episode, like about being genuine, about expressing yourself. You don't want to do that. You want to be political. Like these guys who, not political as in politics, but like, you know, walk the line. I have a hard time doing that for many reasons, how I'm wired, for many reasons. So I've killed more working and sponsorship opportunities than I've gotten. That's a fact. I know that for sure. So I'm a terrible person to ask that, but that's because I'm genuine, right? That's because I'm very honest. And my hardcore audience, that's what they love me for. So there's a trade-off there. And even though my hardcore audience, even though I offer free stuff, they still find ways to support me through the ways that I offer, like, you know, affiliate programs. There's things you can do like that, folks, for websites. Start a website. It's cheap. Use it to host like a WordPress. Host your podcast. Now you've got a website. Now you've got a podcast. Get better at dressing up the front of the website. Apply for affiliate links. They're a little bit of pain in the butt. You can get approved though, especially, you know, maybe you work for an MMA website as well. You can kind of, you know, fortify your little web presence. You don't need to bullshit too far. It's not the highest barrier of entry. And yeah, it's a great way for people to support you, and they have. So that's been nice, and I appreciate those people. But at the same time, could I probably have made more if I was, you know, playing it a little smarter and political and appeasing the audiences? Yeah, I definitely could have.
I say that all the time. I'm like, I'm too nice to like do that, like do that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think I know we've been talking for a while. So last question is the amount of work that goes into it. Like you do pretty intensive like write-ups of everything, and like sometimes I'm sure you've written something and then the fight gets canceled or something, and you're like, oh my god, all my work. Like, so just detail like maybe like how much time you put into each article, or like how do you set aside time like per day, or how do you do that?
I'm always working on the schedule. It's one of the hardest things for me, just the way I'm wired, between like the ADD and otherwise. But thankfully, even before this pandemic era, MMA was already a chaotic sport that got me well attuned to canceled and wasted work. So that bummed me out for the first couple of years, but I've quickly become dead into that. And I'm sharpening my process slowly but surely. That's another weak point of mine, to be honest, Nicole. But it's a good question from you because it's something that everybody needs to find out what works for them.
Yeah, I think so too. Especially like, you know, if you're first getting into it and you're going to be like covering fights, it's like, you know, you're going to be working Saturday nights. So it's like a lot of people don't want to give up their Saturday nights. They figure like, oh, I could just do like breaking news here and there whenever I want. But I mean, it's a commitment. So if you guys want to get into it, you got to know what you're getting into, kind of. So that's why I'm kind of doing this podcast, talking to everybody, getting their point of views, seeing what the deal is for real.
That's awesome. I'm stoked to see more. I'm stoked to see more of these. I really love this idea you're doing here, Nicole. It's great.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on here. I really appreciate it. It's awesome.
No problem. Thank you for having me. And yeah, thank you all for whoever is listening. Make sure you share it though. Subscribe and all the stuff that this will be out as far as those platforms. I know that stuff's a work in progress, so I won't throw any names out there and dig you a hole. But support because Nicole is good people, folks.